Another example of a project that we could do is we could also make a name bar that can sit on a flat surface like your desk or something like that. This might be a project that would be a good project to make for a cooperating teacher or someone that you know could use a name bar on their desk. So let's get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the base. I'm going to create the base with a rectangle. I'll start drawing at the bottom of the page, and you can see that I already have my metal lantern drawn on here. The reason why I'm going to do this name bar is because it's a project that is that can fit in this waste area that I'm going to be creating with this project, or with the lantern project. So I'm going to make it about the size that I want. I'll go to my transform tools here, and I'll get the right size. Let's see, I'm going to make it about 16 inches wide, because that just seems like a nice round number, and about 2 inches tall. So, there we go. Now, you saw that when I did this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, I had this sort of right on the edge of my artboard. I'm going to undo again. Remember that when I make this, it's 16 by 2. If I want this to stay right on the bottom part of my artboard, I can change the reference point. So I'm going to keep it. I'm going to make the bottom left be my reference point. I'll just undo those changes. And now, if I change the height to be 2, it's going to stay right down on the bottom there. It's going to basically be anchored by this point here. So now I've created my base for the name bar. Now I'm going to need to create some text. So to create my last name, I'm going to go over to the text tool. And I'm just going to click in the general area where I want to start typing my text. I'll just type in my last name. I'm going to zoom in here to see what it looks like. Now that font is not the type of font that I'm going to want to use. That looks a little bit wacky. So I'm going to go to my font window. So if I click on window up top here, I'm going to find the type box, and in the type box I can go to, let's see what I'm going to go to, characters. I think it's characters. Yeah, there we go. So now I can find what font I want to use. So I'll scroll through this and find the font that I want. All right, so I found the font that I want. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to change my font size. I'm going to go to my selection tool here. Now I can just drag the font to be the size that I want. Now, I like to hold Shift so that I don't make my font like super like tall and thin or super like short and fat. And that way it keeps the same aspect ratio. So now this is still a font. It's still text. So I'm still going to be able to edit it like I do text. I'm just changing the size right now. So I'm going to make it roughly fill this space here. That's pretty good there. All right. Now if I highlight this, I can still go back and I can still change things. Like I can decide if I want it to be bold or if I want it to be italic. So I think I'm going to use the I think I'm going to use the bold version. And you can also adjust some other things too. If you look into all of these options here, you can adjust a whole bunch of different things about your text. You can adjust sort of like the vertical scale. We can move the baseline up or down. We can set the tracking in between each character. So like if I move this up, you can see how it kind of increases the space in between them or decreases the space in between them. I actually kind of like it with a little bit more space in between. And We can select the font size. We can select the deleting. So there's a whole bunch of different options that you can use in here. Now that I have my name looking pretty much how I'd like for it to look, if I look at it, it's still text. What I want to do now is I want to convert it to shapes. So I'm going to go up to Type, and I'm going to go to, let's see, where is it? Let's see, Create Outlines. So now what it's going to do is it's going to outline every single one of my letters. So now it's no longer text. Now it's a shape, just like a star or a square or a rectangle. Now before I do anything else, if I zoom back out again, if I look at this, there's a couple things that I don't really like about the spacing about this. To me it looks like there's maybe a little bit too much space in between the P and the T with the A in the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can move these around individually so I can adjust the spacing. Now there's a few ways that I can do this. The one thing that I need to remember though is what I'm actually dealing with here. What I'm dealing with is no longer text. I'm now dealing with a series of shapes, or in Illustrator they call them objects. And right now those are all grouped together. So I can do this in a few ways. One, I can grab my selection tool. I can select everything. It's going to select the group, and then what I can do is I can right click and I can go ungroup, and now I'll be able to select each individual component and move it around. The other way that I can do it, I'm just going to undo that change, is I can grab the direct select tool. So right now if I use the selection tool, it's going to select the entire group. If I grab the direct select tool, I can zoom in and I can select either the outside path, that inside path, or the shape itself. So if I select the shape, I can then move it independently without having to ungroup everything. So now I'm going to select all of those, move these over just a smidge, just so I can kind of get it looking a little bit more appropriate. I think I went a little bit too far. So I'm going to grab this one and just nudge it over a little bit with my arrow key. Nudge this one over. And right now I'm just eyeballing this to make sure that it looks how I want it to look. There. It looks how I want it to look. So now if I go back to my selection tool, I can select it and it still is grouped. If I ungrouped it, I'm going to ungroup it for you, and I move some things around. Now if I try and use my selection tool, now I can only select each individual object. So if you want to move it all around as one unison group again, all you have to do is drag it, right click, and we can select group. Can we do it here? Can't do it there. Let's see if I can find it somewhere else. Maybe it's under the Object tab. There we go, Group. Or I could even use the shortcut, which is Control-G. Now it's going to be a group that I can move around in unison once more. Now it's going to be time for me to resize this. If you remember the base of my name bar, this rectangle here, I made it 16 inches wide. So I'm going to make my font be 16 inches wide. So if I go back to my Transform tool panel, the width, I can say it's 16, but this time, because I want to keep the aspect ratio, I'm going to chain those together. So now, when I change the width, the height will change just a little bit as well. There we go. Now I can use my alignment tools to make sure that these are perfectly centered. I'll align the centers. And now I'm ready to start adding something that I call bridges. So the first bridge that I'm going to add is going to be a bridge that's all along the bottom here. And what that's going to do is that's going to link every single letter together. Right now I'm thinking of each black letter like an island. And right now if they're an island, if I cut them out, they're just going to be cut out randomly. or not randomly, but they're going to be cut out, and they're not going to be connected to anything. So I'm creating a bridge across to each of these so they're connected. So I'm going to grab my box tool or rectangle tool. I'll zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to make a rectangle. And this isn't going to be the spot exactly where it is, but I'm going to make it there. Let's check my sizes. If I go to my transform tool panel, it's 16 inches wide. The height is 0.68. The height doesn't really matter that much. It can be whatever you want it to be. So let's now move that so I can position things a lot more close to how they're going to end up looking. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to nudge this down with the arrow key. I'm going to nudge this up. That's pretty good right there. Maybe a tiny bit more up. That's a little bit too far. I can see that. Perfect. The last thing that I'm going to create is I'm going to create bridges between my base plate and my lettering. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool as well. I'm just going to make a the height doesn't really matter. The width is going to matter though. So I'm going to say that I want these to be 1/4 inch wide. So now I'll grab my selection tool, and I'm going to move this all the way to the edge. I can see, hopefully, I'm going to get, oh, there we go. Nice. I got those pink lines that tell me where I want it to be. I'll grab another one, and I'll move it all the way down this way. I'm holding Alt, so that's making a copy of that. Perfect. And now I want to make a support or two in the middle as well. So I think I'm going to make, let's see here. I'm going to put one roughly in the middle here. And then I'm going to put one right here. And I'm going to do one right over here as well, too. Now, I want to make sure that those have even spacing because I want them to look even. I don't want them to look random. So I'm going to select them all. And I'm going to use some more alignment tools to help me with that. So the first thing I notice when I have them selected is that these two are kind of a little bit lower than the other ones. So I'm just going to align the centers of these so they're all the same. Now you can see that these spaces they're close, but they're not quite there. So what I can do then is I can go over to my alignment tools, and if I use this, it's going to horizontally distribute them so the space between them are all even. So let's click on that. There we go. So now I've shifted it so everything is even. So now my design is complete, but I'm going to need to make sure that I still have a copy of it that I can edit later on before I combine everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I'm going to hold down Control, click on the layer that I have. Actually, I don't have this on its own layer. So I'm going to do that before I, let's see. I'm going to do that before I even begin to duplicate the layer. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to double click on here. I'm going to call this name bar. And then I'll highlight everything that I want to go onto the name bar. And you can see right now that it tells me that it's on this layer right here that I created it. Because it's got that dot. What I can do when I have all that highlighted is I can grab this dot and then move it up to the layer that I want. And now all of those components that I have highlighted are now on this new layer. I'm going to take this layer and drag it down this way, and now I can copy and paste it. I'll use the Control button. Oh, highlight it, use the Control, nope, maybe use the Alt button then maybe. There we go, it's the Alt button. So now I have a copy, and I'm going to call this one Welded. Name bar Welded. Because now I can combine it all together. So if I select it all, I can go to my Pathfinder tools, and now I can combine it all into one. So now whenever I select it, it is one whole piece. So all I need to do now is I need to export this as a DXF or DWG, and it's ready for printing.